Far too often when we're first starting out in fitness, we get way too in the weeds of things. We start putting the cart before the horse. There's only 3 things you really need to focus on and hone consistently in order to build muscle. 3 things. Three things: training, nutrition, recovery. As long as these 3 things are optimized to their largest degree, then you can start looking into those other little changes, like, what time of the day should I take creatine? What's the difference between doing 12 and 15 reps on this exercise? See, those are minute questions that come after you've figured out and have been consistent with those 3 things. In the most basic sense, I'm going to cover these 3 variables that make or break your progress. Let's talk about training. You should be training about 5 days per week. Some people train 7 days per week and they do just fine. There are freaks out there. But a good rule of thumb that I've followed and that I've heard anecdotally a lot of people follow is 1 day of rest per every 2 or 3 days of training. In the ballpark of 5 days of training per week. Hitting each muscle group twice during the week. 2 to 3 times even. If you're hitting it just one time, if you have Monday as chest day, and then you don't do chest until the next Monday, you're leaving all this potential time for gains just sitting there. Your chest isn't going to grow very much if you just train it 1 day a week. Because then your body's like, oh, I only need a chest that's big enough to perform once per week. Intensity. In the neighborhood of failure. You're lifting in the neighborhood of failure. You're not lifting all out to failure. Failure meaning you go to perform your last rep and you can't complete it, either because your form breaks down, the load is too heavy, or the pain is too much. Failure, muscular failure, is incredibly taxing on your body. Therefore, you only want to be training to failure very sparingly. Say, maybe for 1 training block out of every 5 or 6 weeks. But like I said, in those 5 days a week, training in the neighborhood of failure, about 2 to 3 reps short of failure. So in your mind, you're doing the bench press, and you're on that, say, 8th rep, and you're like, you know what? I could only do 2 more before I absolutely fail. For most people, most of the time, that's a good place to stop, and that's plenty of stimulus to make your chest grow. That's called, if you want to get technical, an RPE of 8. They say anything over an RPE of 5 causes muscle gains. Volume, not exceeding 20 sets per muscle per week. That's a good, in the most basic sense, that's a good guideline. That's training. Nutrition. For the longest time I was lifting and I was playing around in the gym, and I was making okay gain, but I stagnated for so long, and I just kind of looked like the average gym bro. But the thing that really takes you from being the average gym bro to being somebody who looks like they know what the hell they're doing is your nutrition. For me, it was making sure, it was upping my protein intake. I wasn't eating nearly enough protein. And most people who just eat regularly, regular people, maybe even non-trainees, don't eat a lot of protein. They don't eat nearly enough to cause muscular hypertrophy, for that matter. A good rule of thumb is about 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. Meaning, if you weigh 190 pounds, you're consuming 190 grams of protein. Let's say a chicken bowl at Chipotle. That's about 40 grams of protein. If you double the meat, you get up to like 65. Fats. They should take up about 15% of your caloric intake. Most people meet the fat requirement without even having to focus on it. They're probably one of the least pertinent to training macronutrients because fats are helpful in hormone synthesis and other bodily functions, but they don't provide you energy necessarily like carbs do, and they don't repair your muscles like protein does. But most people are getting enough fat without even knowing it. A lot of the food that we tend to eat is heavily oiled. I never end the day needing to have more fat at the end of the day. 15% of your caloric intake. I eat about 50 to 75 grams a day. You never want to cut the fats too low because, like I said, they're necessary for hormone production. Carbs are your energy. If you're a bodybuilder, you can't be keto. I firmly believe that you can't be keto if you're a bodybuilder because your performance will drop if you're not having carbs. Yes, you can cause gluconeogenesis by converting fats into energy for your workout if you're only eating fats and protein. But still, that's not nearly enough to get you by the amount that you need for a sustainable workout. A lot of people in their bulking season will eat 300 to 400 grams of carbs per day. Carbs become glycogen. Carbs are your energy. Carbs give you the pump. You need carbs. Don't believe the people who say carbs are the enemy. These carbs need to come from whole food sources, low glycemic index sources. You can't just eat candy corn all day because it doesn't potentiate and become available as energy for nearly as long as something like oatmeal. It kind of goes up and then it spikes your insulin and then it is stored to fat quite rapidly. Another aspect of nutrition is supplementation. Supplementation will account for, I've heard the figure, 5% of your results. Everything else is what you do with your own bare hands in the gym, in the kitchen, and when you're sleeping. But supplements can give you an edge. Creatine can increase strength. Caffeine can increase endurance, can blunt the pain response in your brain, can blunt adenosine. It's helpful. Whey protein can be extremely convenient to meet your protein requirements. These 3 supplements are what I would say the cornerstone supplements that you need if you're considering supplementation at all. Caffeine, creatine, and whey protein. Let's talk about recovery. The most underrated aspect of bodybuilding is recovery. Everyone on Instagram is hashtagging, hashtag no days off, hashtag the grind never stops. The bottom line is you're shooting yourself in the foot if you're not taking ample time to recover. So recovery, I'm saying, is times that you're not in the gym, time that you're not working out. This is equally as important as the time in the gym because this is the time that your body takes to repair and to adapt to the stimulus that you've created in the gym. So for sleep, that means sleeping 7 to 9 hours a night. You'll find that if you sleep in that range, there's more time for growth hormone secretion in your sleep. There's more time for muscle protein synthesis. I've made some of my greatest gains when I've slept the best. Fatigue accumulates, so you need to do your best to catch up to fatigue and to kind of damper it down as much as you can through sleeping and taking days off the gym. And taking days off is going to further your progress. And taking deloads, which is a period of time when you're not lifting quite as heavily or quite as intensely as as your normal training. Once you practice those things, and that's why I always say that fitness and bodybuilding is a practice. Once you practice good training, good nutrition, and good recovery, then you can get into those little details, the really small details, but don't put the cart before the horse. It's funny because when people come up to me and ask me in the gym about my physique, maybe I have a pump, maybe I look pretty good, and they say, what do you take? What pre-workout do you take? Do you take creatine? These are their first questions when they're asking, basically, how did you get into this shape? And what they're not realizing is that the way I got into the shape is just consistency in those 3 variables over years and years and years. It's not like taking creatine is going to turn you into a beast in 2 weeks. It's not like taking pre-workout is going to turn you into a, Phil Heath in 2 weeks. It doesn't work like that. These should be the last questions that you ask. The first question should be, what's your training split? What's a good low glycemic source of carbs that you eat? How many hours a night do you sleep? People don't ask these things at the gym because they're not, it seems like Instagram makes it, with all the advertisement and the commercialization of the fitness industry, it makes it seem like there's a magic workout or there's a magic supplement that is giving people these results. When in reality, it's just consistency. Training, nutrition, and recovery. Master those, and I promise you will see immense improvements to your physique. Let me know what you think.